Howdy folks, here's a quick video to dive into a question I get quite a bit, and it's another one of those questions. It's a lot to unpack there. The question is, how do I improvise on a fiddle tune? If I'm playing Clawhammer Banjo, for instance, I'm in a fiddle tune jam, but I don't really know the tune that they're playing. How do people just grab those tunes and just improvise on them? Like I said, that's a big question, but I'm gonna show you, give you a few tips, and I'm gonna do it for you on YouTube. I pulled up the Foghorn String Band, and I typed in Foghorn String Band fiddle tune, and I'm just gonna pick some tunes where I don't recognize the titles, or I know for a fact that it's not a tune I play, so I'm probably not familiar with it. And then I'll spend a minute kind of trying to pick up the tune or getting some sort of banjo part down, and then I'll tell you what the thought process is that I'm going through there, and we'll just kind of go back and forth, have a little dialogue like that, have a little fun with it, and see if it'll help out. So like I said, this is a big thing and kind of a lifelong pursuit for a lot of people, but it all starts with developing an ear, and really developing an ear for the language, because music is just a language. It's a pre-verbal language, or a metaverbal language, however you want to think about it, but it's a language nonetheless. So immersion is the best way to really get your bearings. So that's the first bit of advice, is listen, and try to listen critically as much as possible. And it'll start coming easier for you. And as you build all the different foundational skills that can allow you to just pick up tunes and kind of fake your way along really expertly, this stuff will get easier and easier, and your ear will develop. But there's all sorts of things you can do before you've reached some sort of pinnacle stage. So let's get going. Like I said, I popped in a Foghorn String Band fiddle tune on YouTube here, and got one pulled up already because I like the name here, Roo Up a Gum Stump. By the way, if you're not already familiar with the Foghorn String Band, you got to check them out. They're just great folks, great old-time musicians. You know them though, and they're going to be our unbeknownst special guest today. So anyway, I like the name of this one, Roo Up a Gum Stump, and I don't know that, so we'll listen. All right, hopefully you could hear me there over the recorded audio, and that's pretty cool. So obviously I didn't learn that tune note by note there, but I was able to jump in really easily. Got pretty lucky with that one. It's a pretty straightforward tune, and it's pretty basic, which is pretty common in old-time folk fiddle tunes, right? So your chances are you can find your way into a lot of these tunes fairly easily. But let me tell you what I did there. First thing I did was I listened up and just tried to figure out what key we were going to be in. I got a little lucky on that too, right? Because I'm sitting here in open G tuning, kind of the standard tuning, right? And when they started playing,
it's called Roo Up a Gum Stump.
I started looking for some notes. That might sync up with the key that they happen to be in. I started hitting my open strings, and they all sounded pretty good. I thought, oh, I bet they're in the key of G. So that's a good way to, you can just start hunting and pecking, and sometimes you can find your way pretty easily to the key they're in. Depending on where you are ear development wise, that's maybe easier or harder said than done. But a good tip there is if you can catch a phrase and just hear where any of the musical phrases end. So they have something in the beginning that's something like something like that. But I'm pretty sure that last note is correct because that's a G note there. So if you listen to where any of a distinct musical phrase ends, and you can kind of key in on that note and find it on your banjo, that's a good chance that that's actually the root note of the key. That's a little trick I use sometimes to try to figure out what key a tune is in, especially if I can't grab it right away. I can usually grab it pretty well just from a lot of experience and ear development. So that was my first thing I figured out there in the key of G. And then the next thing I did, you could go back and watch. You probably see the next thing I did was try to just grab the chords. So on the banjo, some people get a little excited and they just want to be kind of ripping a bunch of the melody notes out there. But really, ideally, you're playing some supplemental notes, and some chords are a great place to start with the chord harmony. So again, how do I know how to do that? Well, just use my musical knowledge. Key of G, I know the three primary chords in the key of G are going to be G, C, and D. Your 1 chord is your G, your 4 chord is your C, your 5 chord is your D. And a lot of people know that just experientially, or they know a little bit of that theory and analysis, that music theory. They have some of that analytical knowledge as well. And folks like me, I use I use my experience, I use my vernacular experiential knowledge, and I use any kind of theory and study and analytical knowledge I have as well, and it all kind of comes together in the moment. So I thought, well, it's going to be G, C's, and D's in here probably, and probably a lot of G, a lot of your home chord. So I started playing along and started dosing pretty quickly. This might be one of those tunes that's almost all just the 1 chord. And it kind of is. It sounds like it's something you could just play all 1 chord. So let's listen again. And looks like, who knows, maybe the internet is dying on us. But you hear there, I'm just playing open G chords and just kind of doing some boom chicka strumming there, picking out some particular notes there on those boom notes. And as long as I kind of sync up with the G note there, wherever those musical phrases end, sounds like I know what I'm doing. And honestly, that would work just fine as an accompaniment for this whole tune. You could really get away with just playing 1 chord. If you come across a tune like that, Rubens Train's a real common one like that, where 1 chord can work for the whole thing. You'll find that most people will add some variations in and maybe play the 5 chord as well. So you could play a D chord in there. So I started doing that a little bit once I got into it and thought I had established pretty firmly that I could get away with playing just the 1 chord. You can do some turnarounds to that 5 chord. But like I said, you don't really have to go to that 5 chord. It's more of an implied change there. So I was just hearing that. And then in this video, you had the benefit of having 2 guitar players there, and you can see that they never actually leave that G chord position. So that's another fine tip and trick if you're not already in the habit of it. Look at the guitar player. Whether you play guitar chords or not, you can get in the habit pretty quickly of identifying some nice common open guitar chords and kind of follow along with those for some chord harmony cues. And even if you can't identify what chord it is, you can see when the chords are changing. So if the guitar player knows what they're doing, you can use them as a reference as well. So I'm looking here. These guitars sound great on this tune, and they're not really leaving that G chord. They're playing, every once in a while, one of them will play a little extra bass note or do a little quick bass run, but mostly they're staying on the 1 chord. All right, so that's kind of a chordal approach. Found the key, we found the chords. We could end it right there. I could just say that's my approach. However the tune goes, right? But of course, you might want to add a little more. But there's a foundational amount of information right there that would work just fine. But then, how did I jump in and start kind of emulating the tune pretty well? You know, I'm listening to those phrases, feeling the character of them. Like I said, if you can hone in on where the phrases end, and they usually end on the root note of your 1 chord. If they don't, you can usually figure out what note they are ending on, and you can just make sure that you kind of end whatever you're doing. You kind of maybe accent that note at the appropriate time to kind of really solidify that you know what you're doing, and your sounds are gonna really mesh with the sounds you're coordinating with, right? So the next step there is just, do you know what are some pretty available common notes that you might play in the key of G, right? Since I know I'm in the key of G, I can start accessing notes that I know are common. So you don't have to have any music theory knowledge or anything. If you've played some tunes in G, learned a few of them, you probably know where some of your common notes are. All your open strings work in the key of G. Those are all really common notes. And then there's some other really common, what I call safe notes. These are really just major pentatonic notes, if you want to get technical. So all your open notes, and then your 2nd fret on your 1st, 3rd, and 4th strings, you can add that 2nd fret, 5th fret up on your 1st string. So really you have all your open strings, you have the 2nd fret on the 4th, 3rd, and 1st string. Pretty easy to remember, and then you have your 5th fret up here. Like I said, I know that from experience from playing tunes, but you can also analyze that kind of stuff. You can come to that conclusion or get it kind of ingrained in your head pretty well if you're in the habit of doing some music theory studies and stuff like that. So if you knew how to figure out the notes of a G major scale, it's just handy to know how to do this stuff. It's not necessary though, necessarily. If I use something like this and use my little system that I use here that most people use to kind of figure out the notes of a G major scale, I can see that those are my notes. So what I'm doing right now, just so you know, I'm doing what's known as a major pentatonic scale. And all it means is I'm doing a major scale, but I'm pretty much avoiding the 4th and the 7th notes of that major scale. And these are your kind of, this makes for a much more open, more applicable scale. You don't have to know much about when to play what. If you can just play those 5 notes all up and down the fretboard in a G major tune, you're going to find most of the key notes in a tune. So what that turns into on a fretboard is, if we're in open G tuning, whoops, gonna have to get back here. So if we're at open G tuning, we know that G, D, G, B, and D are the notes we have our strings tuned to. Here are those notes we came up with on the other vision there, right? We had G, A, B, D, E. So we see our open strings are already 3 of the 5 notes of a pentatonic scale. There's an E right there. There's an A right there. There's another E. Here's a nice G. So they're up in our open position. It's only 4 notes to fret plus all our open strings. We can really have some fun. Now we can also get out of position and find there's another B there, of course. You want to have some fun. There's another D, and etc. So, but honestly, if you just want a place to start with this, start with those notes right there. You don't have to know really the names of them. You can just think of them as fretted notes and open strings. Got your opens up here. And the only thing that would be a little helpful to know is that your open third string, also your fifth fret on your first string, that's your G notes. So those are your home bass notes, really. So armed with nothing but that knowledge right there, I could, you know what, I'll leave this up here for you. I could jam along with a tune like this, just playing those notes, trying to catch the root note at the end of the phrases. And that'll get me pretty far.